type of thing. And we were looking at it for fun games to play and making our own games, which we did.
Across North America, teenagers are mesmerized and adults are concerned.
Well, you can cause a good deal of inflammation in this joint and this joint simply from coming down, almost like the hammer on a piano.
The microchip that powers video games is about to launch a social transformation. It will sweep away old ways of work. As this tiny rectangle of sand and wire expands its power, the computer moves into factories, homes, and offices.
What does it leave you free to do?
It leaves me free. While it's printing, I can answer the phone. I can do other little chores that I have to do while it's printing. Otherwise, I would be just typing.
Does it make your job less boring?
Oh, it's exciting. I really like it.
Through the 1980s, technology changes the day-to-day lives of Canadians. Consumers are deluged with new products that promise to make life easier. There are predictions of a 4-day work week before the end of the century. The dawn of a leisure society. In 1983, Time magazine chooses as its Man of the Year a machine. But there is another side to the computer revolution. Madeleine Grignon has been a telephone operator since 1947. When an automated system is introduced in Saint-Agathe-des-Monts, Quebec, she and 40 colleagues are out of work.
That is why there is so much unemployment now. Technology. A woman with a family couldn't move to another city to work. It changed too much, too fast.
There are stories of factories in Japan run entirely by computerized robots. In Canada, a secret government report in 1983 predicts that up to half of all manufacturing jobs will disappear by the end of the decade. These are alarming statistics for workers at the Inglis plant in Toronto, where people still assemble parts by hand. Many fear technology will take away their jobs. But union leader Mike Hirsch thinks the factory needs technology to keep up.
That was a concern for the union, that there was no new technology. Because we'd heard that there was new technology being introduced elsewhere, and we thought, well, how can they be competitive in this joint?
As a child, James Schmaltz began a lifelong obsession with computer games, playing them and inventing his own. At age 24, he has a degree in engineering, a job offer, and a dilemma.
I was deciding between this really great job and basically living in poverty to make my next game. I just remember my father saying, you know, it would be a big mistake if I didn't take this real job.
James Schmaltz, fixated on his games, turns down the engineering job. Soon his father doesn't have to worry. The boy who put his newspaper route money towards the family's first computer will sell his next game for more than $1 million. He will become one of a new breed of entrepreneurs, many working in fields that didn't exist when the 1980s began. On a peaceful summer morning, a familiar drone approaches. For decades, insecticides have been sprayed over the forests of New Brunswick.
But to New Brunswickers these days, one of the finest sights in the sky is the little spray plane with its deadly cargo of DDT.
By the late 1970s, this noise has become ominous. In New Brunswick, there is a possible link between chemical sprays and children's deaths.
Everybody was concerned about the forests. Who was going to be concerned about the people and their health in this province?
Now, Nova Scotia is planning an insecticide program to combat budworm. But the forest companies who want to spray as much as 2 million acres of Cape Breton will face a fight from an unexpected source.
Phenitrathion, organophosphate.
In her family's diner in Margery Harbor, a 22-year-old waitress prepares for battle.
I just had to work damn hard and be way more creative than they were. We cared more about it than they did. It was their job, and it was our life.
I'd like to introduce Miss Elizabeth May.
With a head full of statistics and a homemade flip chart, Elizabeth May takes the first steps of a lifetime crusade.
Now, in 1952 in New Brunswick, they had a budworm epidemic. There was an epidemic in 1952 in New Brunswick. There was an epidemic in 1952 in Cape Breton. We didn't spray in Cape Breton, and the epidemic collapsed on its own. They sprayed it. Yes, it did in 1952.
The forest industry warns that without spraying, 2,000 jobs will disappear. Despite the threat, most Cape Bretoners steadfastly oppose spraying.
I don't think that it's insignificant that when the final tally was done, that over 6,000 people wrote the government that they were against spraying, and only 18 wrote that they were for.
A growing environmental movement is disrupting industries Canadians have long depended on. Frank Beeben is a logger working on South Moresby off the coast of British Columbia.
The whole income of our country comes from places like this, the actual logging and mining and fishing. That's where it comes from, and it has to continue.
His company has the right to log here, but environmentalists join the Haida Indians in a battle to preserve an ancient rainforest.
You're blocking the road. You're breaking the law. Would you please stand aside and let us through?
For now, the loggers will continue, but the fight for South Moresby is not over. Across the country, Canadians are becoming alarmed about their land and their lakes. Water poisoned by acid rain. A hole discovered in the ozone layer. Oceans plundered. Landfill sites overflowing. The Earth seems increasingly fragile. and Canadians realize they have a responsibility. In Kitchener, Ontario, a new program quickly achieves a 90% participation rate. It is Canada's first citywide recycling program. Soon, curbside recycling boxes are a familiar sight across Canada. Environmental groups that began on the fringes of Canadian society become more mainstream. But for Elizabeth May, now a law student, it's still a cause running on donations and volunteers.
And we've had such wonderful care from everybody here. I want to thank Victoria Rose Flower Shop for sending us flowers, and I want to thank, I think it's Mr. McDougall in East Bay who's been sending us lasagna.
Grassroots environmentalism seems incompatible with big government. But poll after poll in the 1980s tells government that Canadians see the environment as a top priority. Elizabeth May, now a lawyer, gets a phone call from Federal Environment Minister Tom McMillan.
He needed a real, live, honest-to-God environmentalist working right in his own office.
In her new job, Elizabeth May is quickly swept up in the campaign for South Moresby off the British Columbia coast. More and more people are fighting to preserve this unique wilderness, home to giant cedar and irreplaceable history. Elizabeth May realizes she can contribute in a new way.
I'm the only one in this whole movement at this point who really knows how the system works. I know what these departments do. I know what a deputy minister does. And I know what the Privy Council office is.
McMillan's office receives more letters about South Moresby than any other single issue.
I'm overwhelmed. It's just breathtakingly beautiful. I think it should be saved. And I'm eager to work with those who share my view.
In 1988, South Moresby is declared a National Park Reserve. For the Haida who live here, for environmentalists, for Elizabeth May, it is a time for celebration. Elizabeth May's job with the Environment Ministry ends after 2 years. She resigns when the government approves 2 potentially harmful dams in Saskatchewan. There will be other battles ahead. She will continue her life's work as she began, on the front lines of the environmental movement.
We lived not far from the Longhouse itself, and you could hear the drums at night. The drums made me curious, a little frightened, but curious at the same time.
As a child in Kanesatake, Quebec, Ellen Gabriel absorbed her grandmother's stories about stolen Indian land. Gabriel is part of a generation that will try to claim that land back. The demands will come from every part of the country. It's Treaty Day in Fort Good Hope in the Northwest Territories. People are lining up for their payments, agreed to in the 1921 treaty. George Erasmus is a Dene who has researched these treaties. He is convinced his people still own the land.
We really believed that the land belonged to the Dene, and that the Dene had never given up the right to govern the land. And what's there? The territorial government, an arm of the federal government, is administering federal authority illegally.
George Erasmus and other young Dene want to control their own lives and the land they live on. The two are inseparable for Erasmus.
Without renewable resources to harvest, we lose both our livelihood and our way of life.
But in the mid-1970s, oil and gas companies push north, hoping to develop Canada's last frontier.
I am Judge Berger, and I am conducting an inquiry.
The proposed gas pipeline through the Mackenzie Valley threatens a way of life for 7 Dene tribes and the Inuit of the Western Arctic. Thomas Berger visits communities throughout the valley and listens. George Erasmus tells him the Dene people have declared themselves a nation.
We're simply stating the same position that our people have always had. Our people have never given up the right to govern themselves. Our people have never given up this land.
Calling for a radical change in the...
For many Canadians, watching the Berger inquiry is the first time they hear Native concerns voiced by the people themselves. In the spring of 1977, Berger makes his recommendation.
It is my conviction that the social impact on the Native people will be devastating. I think the economic benefits to Northerners generally will be limited.
The Dene learned that they could actually be actors in their own history again.
Through the 70s and 80s, a new confidence builds among Aboriginal communities. In Kanesatake, Quebec, Ellen Gabriel begins to explore her Mohawk roots through art.
When I was in my early 20s, I really started making a point of reflecting my culture, reflecting who I am, looking for Indian faces or symbols, and that eventually evolved into researching my own roots.
In Red Sucker Lake, Manitoba, Chief Elijah Harper is part of a new wave of university-educated leaders. He wants to help his struggling community and decides to work within the political system. In 1981, he runs as an NDP candidate for the Manitoba legislature.
In the city, you are followed by the media and you know that people are being informed. But people in the north don't have that. I have to explain to them that I am running for the NDP and that there will be different colors on the ballot for each party. Parties don't mean much to them in a political or philosophical sense.
Harper becomes the first Treaty Indian in the Manitoba legislature. He is new to the halls of power, but one day Elijah Harper will have a memorable impact on the politics of the country.
We are not extremists.
During the 1980s, government and Native leaders meet face-to-face to discuss land claims and Native self-government.
The reality has been that we have not been recognized in one shape.
George Erasmus is here, representing the Dene. But 3 First Ministers' conferences through the 80s achieve little. Now head of the Assembly of First Nations, Erasmus delivers a warning.
We say, Canada, if you do not deal with this generation of leaders and seek peaceful solutions, then we cannot promise that you are going to like the kind of violent political action that we can just about guarantee the next generation is going to bring to you.
There have already been aggressive tactics to bolster land claims.
Move aside.
The Haida in the Queen Charlotte Islands, British Columbia. The Temeyagama Anishinaabe in Temagami, Ontario.
This road is closed forever.
The Lubicon in Little Buffalo, Alberta. But the most dramatic showdown is over a disputed piece of land outside Montreal near the town of Oka. The Mohawks of Ganasataki are protesting the planned expansion of a golf course on territory they claim. This protest explodes into a national crisis.
Coming in.
A police officer is killed.
Come on.
Horrified Canadians watch as soldiers face off with armed combatants from the Militant Warrior Society.
Wow, you watch out with your men. Hey, hey!
Ellen Gabriel is with her people behind the barricades, and soon she's in the spotlight.
The Sûreté du Québec is still not honoring the precondition arrangement that was signed.
I think Aboriginal people really strongly identify with what was happening here. And they said, yeah, something like that has happened to us.
Hey!
Maybe not to that extreme, but we recognize that pain.
Push it back, leave it!
In Ottawa, George Erasmus refuses to condemn the Mohawks of Ganasataki.
And we never want to see the army used on our people ever again.
After 78 tense days, the standoff ends. But discontent and frustration among Aboriginal groups does not. During the decade, just a handful of claims are settled, out of hundreds. And other voices echo the warning that Native concerns must be addressed, or Canadian governments will pay the price. Karen Klein is preparing for two special events in May of 1990. One is the Spring Formal at Our Lady of Lourdes High School in Guelph, Ontario.
This dance was very important to me as one of our last formal school functions, before we all went many different ways.
The second special event of the spring is a class trip to Montreal.
Is this the end of Meech Lake? Does it have a chance at all now?
I still say that Canada does improve Quebec and we should be fighting to keep them. Just let it go.
Soon, the 21 Guelph students will meet with Quebecers their own age. They will debate a subject that is taking the country on a roller coaster ride, a controversial deal known as the Meech Lake Accord. Prime Minister Brian Mulroney has come to power determined to get what Pierre Trudeau did not: Quebec's signature on the Constitution. He vows to have Quebec participate with honor and enthusiasm. On a chilly spring day in 1987, on the shores of Meech Lake near Ottawa, the Prime Minister and 10 premiers achieve what seemed impossible: a unanimous deal to revise Canada's constitution.
This has been a good day for Canada and Canadians.
Premier Robert Bourassa is satisfied Quebec's demands have been met, including a clause recognizing his province as a distinct society.
It's an historic breakthrough for Quebec as a Canadian partner.
For Quebec student Martin Labonté, the Meech Lake Accord stirs an interest in politics for the first time.
I had confidence in Bourassa, who was someone moderate and who had set only the minimal conditions, and also in Brian Mulroney, who had the courage to attempt to solve the national issue.
Parliament and legislatures have a 3-year deadline to pass the Meech Lake Accord.
You don't think ratification is a formality then?
Oh no, I would suspect there will be a great deal of debate. I hope so.
From retirement, Pierre Trudeau dismisses the accord as a total bungle and Brian Mulroney as a weakling. The federal government, he says, is giving away too much power to the provinces. Native leaders like Elijah Harper are angry the accord doesn't recognize the place of Aboriginal people.
We are a nation. It takes nations to make treaties. So why were we not involved in the creation of a constitution for this nation?
The Reform Party's Preston Manning opposes the idea of a distinct society. He wants the Constitution to emphasize equality of all provinces. And many Canadians resent the closed-door negotiations that led to the deal. Lawyer Mary Eberts is frustrated that, once again, Canadians were not consulted.
I was mad that they had learned so little from the experience of the Charter of Rights, that they had tried to go back to treating us as if Canadians had no interest in our Constitution, and as if they would sit quietly by while the deal cut by a bunch of bureaucrats and politicians was forced down our throats.
As the uproar over Meech Lake grows, Martin Labonté is in Vancouver for an English-language immersion program. Far from his home in Abitibi, Quebec, he realizes some people view him as an outsider.
2 kids spat in our direction because we were talking French. That was the moment I felt that tensions were high in Canada during the Meech Lake negotiations. It was also the moment that I understood for the first time in my life that we were different from the rest of Canada because of our language.
Karen Klein and the rest of the high school students from Guelph arrive in Montreal as the Meech debate is at its height.
On veut qu'on dise qu'on puisse dire nous sommes Québécois avant de dire on est Canadien.
Karen Klein supports Meech Lake, but realizes the issues are more complex here than in her classroom in Guelph.
You couldn't separate the success or failure of the Meech Lake Accord from the looming threat of separation.